Lock it in here. The evil design of Japan's death penalty.
Today, most of the developed world has ended the death penalty. But in 2024, there are still two...
Hold on, I gotta turn it down. Jesus Christ.
There are still two countries in the OECD that use it. The United States of America and Japan.
There's only two... There's not that many countries that use the death penalty anymore. Like, does the UK do the death penalty, or is it only the US and Japan?
But while the US has been transparent about its ultimate punishment, it was only in 2010 that the world was finally shown the evil design of Japan's death penalty. July 26, 2022. Tomohiro Kato is sitting in his cell in the Tokyo Detention Center. 14 years ago, he killed 7 people and injured 10.
東京の警察によると、秋生セクアンでの自傷事件で少なくとも7人が死亡し、10人が負傷しました。警察による
stabbing rampage, he stabbed 7 people to death.
ある男がトラックで買い物かの群れに
Usually when you see somebody killed 7 people, it's with a f***ing gun. He stabbed 7.
突っ込みました。その後、彼はレンタカーから飛び降り、倒した人々を刺し始め、次に恐怖に限った傍観者に注意を向けました。
In 2011, Tomohiro Kato was sentenced to death. Every day he wakes up at 7 a.m. and heads to bed at 9 p.m. in a cell that's the size of about 4 tatami mats. He has a sink, a commode, bedding, and a small desk. In Japan, death row inmates can wait decades for an execution. But unlike the US, they wait for a day they never really know is coming.
They don't tell them when they're gonna die? What? Wait, so they could just randomly just be like, all right, today's the day. See you in 10 minutes. And you're like, trying to gather your fucking wherewithal to be like, oh my god, I'm gonna fucking die. I'm gonna fucking die right now. I feel like it'd be easier. God, that's actually way scarier. That's actually way scarier. Being on death row and knowing, like, I'm gonna die in 8 years and 6 hours and fucking 23 minutes. It's like you have the time to be able to prepare for that. And it is kind of whack because it's an unnatural death in the sense that you know when you're gonna die. But you're at least able to know, like, okay, I have this much time to think about it. Whereas in Japan, they just kind of randomly pull you.
Any random morning, the inmate can be taken to the execution chamber. They're given no more than a few hours' notice.
Would y'all rather have the death penalty, like, in the US or Japan in that sense? Would y'all rather know when they're gonna kill you, or they just fucking kill you? Well, I mean, they'll tell you, like, an hour before. I'm surprised that many people are saying Japan. Like, you would just want to just have them randomly be like, all right, today's the day, 3 hours, you're dead.
The Japanese state says that this helps with emotional stability, that it reduces the chances of an inmate taking life. Some argue it's justice. Their victims weren't given notice either. Others say it's inhumane. For 34 years, a man named Menda Sakai didn't know which day would be his last. In 1983...
34 years? Dude, I'd be like, let's get the show on the fucking road. I'd be waking up every day thinking the day's the day. And then I'm 34 years in fucking prison, and I'm like, y'all haven't fucking killed me yet. When is this happening? Anytime soon? Or no? I mean, I'm fucking 85 now. Some old man in prison, he's like, please, at this point, I want you to.
He was freed. The police officer...
Oh my god, they let him go. Oh, wait, so it's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that they're gonna die. Is that why?
...him, revealed that he had concealed Sakai's alibi that proved he was innocent.
Bro, he was in prison for 34 years on death row and he was innocent? I better be getting a bag if that was me. I better be getting a fucking bag. I better be getting a bag, and I better be getting some serum that's gonna anti-age the fuck out of me. 34 years? Dude, no amount of money is gonna fucking pay that back. 34 years of your life down the drain? I don't give a fuck if they gave me $1 billion. I'd be like, that guy looked like 75. I'd be like, bro, you just took fucking half of his life and he was innocent.
12,410 mornings with an unjustified fear for execution. In 2014, Iwa Hakamada was also released and given a retrial due to possibly falsified evidence. He was the longest-serving death row inmate on the planet. Hakamada spent more than 45 years in prison,
45 years waiting to die?
waiting. In the Tokyo Detention Center, Kato sits in his cell. He's surrounded by objects purposely made rounder, so that he can't finish off his sentence earlier than expected. On July 26, 2022, after 14 years of waiting, he hears more noises than usual outside of his door. Today, the majority of the developed world has outlawed the death penalty. But Japan is strange.
Do y'all think the death penalty should be in place? No, but here's why. Because rotting in prison is worse than dying. Like, I understand the death penalty for extreme criminals, right? Serial killers and, like, stringed murderers, mass murderers, shit like that, like serial rapists or something. But if you're, like, 35 and you killed 50 people and then you're going to die, I know when you're on death row, even in the United States, you don't die immediately. It takes a decade for them to kill you, right? Depending on what state you're in. But if you're 35, you killed 50 people, right? This is a hypothetical scenario. They give you death row. You're going to die when you're 45. Or they put you in a shitty prison and you have to live in prison until you're 90 and then you fucking keel over. I think it depends on the person which one they would deem as worse. But I feel like having to know that you're going to be in prison the rest of your life and having to live that life out and being able to think about, like, oh my God, I'm never going to get out, is worse than being like, okay, I'm going to die. Just dying is more scary. I don't know. I feel like it depends. And it especially depends how old you are. Like, getting the death penalty, yeah. I mean, I could see, if you're, like, young, getting the death penalty would be worse than, like, life in prison because you haven't lived a life. But, like, it also depends what prison you're living in. If you're living in, like, a Norwegian prison where you can have fucking cooking utensils, yeah, that's not that bad. But if you're in, like, fucking Texas state and you're living in a shitty ass cell, right, and you have no one, then that's probably worse.
Explains why. Even though it's still legal in the US, it's debatable. The United States is a federal, divided country. Many states have phased out the death penalty entirely. Japan, on the other hand, is a centralized state where polls have shown that the public supports it with a clear majority. The US's death penalty is intimately connected with its history of racial discrimination and enslavement. Japan is ethnically homogeneous and has less inequality. The fall of an authoritarian leader like Hitler, Mussolini, Salazar, and Franco all led to the abolition of the death penalty in their respective countries. Japan's authoritarian state also fell, but the death penalty remained. In Austria, Great Britain, and France, the election of a left-wing government all led to the abolition of capital punishment. In 2009, Japan elected the center-left Democratic Party of Japan. The death penalty stayed. But what makes Japan's situation even stranger is how uniquely brutal it is. Its homicide rate is a fraction of that found in the US, and it's lower than all the European countries which have abolished the death penalty. Nevertheless, the percentage of murder offenders sentenced to death in Japan and the US are around the same.
Really? So there's way more murderers in the United States, but the percentage of people that are sentenced to death is higher in Japan.
In 2018, 15 Japanese prisoners were killed, with about 116 inmates on death row. That's 10 less than the US's 25, which had more than 10 times the amount of inmates on death row. 7 of the 15 executions were part of the AUM Shinriko doomsday cult. The Japanese state sometimes executes in batches. All 7 were killed on the same morning. While the US explicitly treats the death penalty differently from other criminal sentencing, in Japan it's treated like other criminal punishments. To be put to death in the US, you must go through a bifurcated trial system. There is a criminal trial for determining guilt or innocence, which requires unanimity. After, if determined to be guilty, it goes to another trial for deciding the punishment.
Wait, the jury decides death or not in the US? I thought the jury didn't decide death. I thought the jury just decides guilty or non-guilty. The jury itself also decides whether or not they get put to death. Wow. I did not know that.
Here, you must receive, again, a unanimous agreement from the jury. Then, the judge can serve you the death penalty. Florida and Alabama are the only exceptions. But these two states are outliers in the U.S. context, and they still require a supermajority. In Japan, it's different. Under the Saiban system, citizens act like judges. They sit alongside professional ones to determine both the verdict and the sentence of a crime. All that is required for the death penalty is a majority. In theory, 5 judges on the panel can believe the defendant.
Damn! So you could have 11 people? You could have 11 motherfuckers and 6 of them say you gotta die and 5 don't, and they say, well, that sucks. Sorry. Holy shit. Dude, that's like, you could have like 51% of the people just go, yeah, no, you gotta die. And that you'd be like, well, oh my God, if one guy could have changed his fucking mind.
Is guilty and deserves the death penalty, while the other 4 could believe the defendant is innocent and deserves no punishment whatsoever.
What? I thought that was just fucking death penalty or not. Oh my God. 6 of them could go, you need to die. And the other 5, not even you're guilty, you just should have prison. The other 5 could go, this guy didn't do it. And they'd still execute him. Holy shit.
With this close,
It should be 8 or something. I mean, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I feel like you should have 7. 7 judges. 7 should have to agree. A broad majority, I think, is fair. An uneven amount. Well, you need an uneven amount of judges so you can have a majority.
a vote. The defendant can be sentenced to death. In Japan, there are 7 detention centers that execute the death penalty.
There's typically 12 jurors in Japan or the U.S. In the U.S., they're saying it has to be majority. I know in the U.S., I've had friends that have done jury duty, and they have to unanimously agree. In the United States, I know the majority, at least, of trials that people have talked to me about, everyone has to say, okay, this guy's guilty, this guy's innocent. And they can disagree, but I think, don't they have to debate until they all agree? Like, some jurors can have to stay for multiple days longer because they have to convince one guy in the entire jury to side with them. And if they don't, then they could go to a whole nother trial with different people. Like, say you have 12 jurors in the United States, and we're all arguing that one guy ran over a family and killed them. And one dude in the group goes, I don't think he did. And you're like, come on, man, like, blah, blah, blah. And you're talking, days go by. Days go by. That guy's not budging. New trial. They just keep going. I think that's good, though. It's annoying, right? Because there's certain scenarios where it's like, why is this one guy disagreeing? But I think having it so every single person has to agree makes sense. But alternatively, that's also kind of bad in the sense that some people can sway other people's opinions. Rather than them just voting without talking to the other individuals, they might be able to be like a very charismatic guy and just convince everybody to do what they think is right. I don't know. I think that depends on the people, the situation, but I think just the idea of having a broad majority or full majority makes more sense than just a majority.
It's the justice minister who decides when it will take place. 5 days after he or she signs the warrant, the prisoner is put to death. These are usually signed right before political recess, moments where media coverage is limited. The executions are not made clear to the family members and lawyers of the inmates. They only learn after it's taken place.
Wow.
Kato is brought into a prayer room. Here he is read his last rites by a spiritual advisor. He is given time to write a will and maybe to consume some snacks or even smoke a cigarette. Afterwards, he's taken into another small room with an...
Why do they always say that shit? He has some time to eat some snacks. I'm gonna die. I'm a little hungry. It doesn't matter. What the fuck? Hey, man, do you have any Pringles? I want to be full before I get my head cut off. What? You having hunger only matters if you're gonna not die within the next 10 minutes. Do snacks include weed? Fuck that, dude. If I was getting the death penalty, I don't want shit. I would just want to fucking sit, maybe a cigarette, honestly. One last hurrah. You know, lung cancer ain't gonna kill you. You know, lung cancer ain't gonna kill you. Whatever they're gonna fucking use to kill you is gonna kill you. But fuck using weed. Oh my god. If I'm on death row and they're like, "Hey, you want some weed?" and I get high, I'm gonna start fucking tweaking, dude. That's not gonna make me feel more calm.
In this room, the execution order is officially read out by the prison warden. The last thing Kato sees are the blue curtains covering the next room. The guards wrap a bleached white blindfold around his eyes,
Oh my god,
throw a black hood over his head, handcuff his hands behind his back, and tie his knees together.
Holy shit. Holy shit.
He is taken to the next and final room. In the US, lethal injection is the primary method of executing the death penalty.
They still use hanging?
In Japan, hanging is the only method. At the center of the room are 2 red squares. An inmate is made to stand in the center. Beneath is a trap door connected to an adjacent room. When the inmate is in place, 3 officers enter this room. They do not see the prisoner.
Oh, do they all press the button, but only one button actually pulls the thing so they don't feel bad?
What they see instead are 3 identical buttons. 2 do nothing, but the third opens the trap door. The 3 officers do not know which one is the kill switch. This divides the responsibility between all 3. It's also been mentioned that there is a delayed circuit to hide who pressed the kill button if they were pressed at different times, but I could not find a good source to confirm this. For their service, all 3 officers received 20,000 yen, about $180 each. Watching the execution are a few officials: the head of the detention center, a medical officer, and the prosecutors. The medical officer waits for 5 minutes until confirming the death. After
I originally thought they were going to say 20,000 US dollars, and I was going to go,
the body is cleaned, the
20,000 US?
families are notified. The body will be cremated unless the family specifies otherwise. In the case of some high-profile inmates, the ashes are kept in state custody. It was
Why?
only in 2007 that the Japanese government even released the names of those put to death. Currently, there are 106 inmates awaiting their execution in Japan. The last person sentenced...
Dude, right now. It's, like, so weird to think about. Like, we're watching this video, but, like, right now, like, imagine there are 106 Japanese men or women sitting in a fucking cell right now, just, like, not... Like, I genuinely, right now, one of them is awake thinking about when they're gonna die.
...to death row killed 36 people in an arson attack. Tomohiro Kato was the last person executed in the country. I only felt comfortable putting this video in production after it was confirmed that a very specific organization would sponsor it. If topics like this one make you feel eager for positive change in the world, you should check
Do they do charity stuff?
a difference on those problems and how you personally might be able to make the most difference.
Respectful.
You can access their completely free career guide for practical research-driven advice
I'll keep
on
that.
how to plan a career that's fulfilling
Most other ads I'm skipping, as I know other people probably skip mine.
and meaningful. Check out their free career guide at 80,000hours.org/hoog.
Dub. All right, that was a fucking entertaining ass video, dude. I did not know any of that shit. Wow. Okay. Next.